The dominant theme during Girardi's press conference was Aroldis Chapman, because Chapman spoke by his locker today, and we all know that before the Yankees acquired him, he had the alleged domestic violence incident. So he fielded a lot of questions about that, Chapman did, and I actually thought he handled himself well. He didn't shed any new light on anything, and he talked about how there are things he can't discuss, but he did say he spoke with investigators and that he's excited to be a Yankee. He also did say, guys, what I found interesting is that if he did get suspended by Major League Baseball, he would plan to appeal it. So this is a guy who obviously thinks he can fight in this situation. And then, as I said, Girardi in his press conference, I want to guess that almost half the questions that he took were about Chapman. He talked a lot about the seriousness of domestic violence, but also sort of talked about a guy who, as a manager, has to have his players' backs. And one thing that he kept on saying was, when I was a player, no one ever turned their back on me. So I think Girardi was already trying to show Chapman that, hey, I've got your back. While he was saying he obviously is against domestic violence, we all are, this is a guy he's going to have to manage as well.
Now, there were some damning things in the report. The alleged domestic violence, all right, the case never happened, but even if he did say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there were no inaccuracies in the report, so the firing of the gun did seem to take place. So even though he will not serve any time, even though he will not be suspended by Major League Baseball.
He might be suspended by Major League.
But he may not be either.
Right.
So the fact is, Jack, if a fan or even somebody on the team is like, I just question his character, is that fair?
Of course it is. Sure. Someone is obviously allowed to do that. And Girardi was asked questions about his character. And again, I thought Girardi handled himself very artfully in this press conference, because he said, listen, I'm not going to go off things from a police report. I'd rather get to know the player myself. That's my job as a manager, to get to know the player. We can stand here or sit here and say, hey, if you have an anger issue and have a situation with a loved one or a spouse or a girlfriend, you should not go to a garage and fire 8 shots. But the law will tell you that that gun was registered, that if he wanted to do that, it's his right to do it. You and I might not do it, but he did do it. And I'm not defending him as much as I'm explaining what the situation was. And when no charges were brought against him by law enforcement officials, I think that puts Major League Baseball in a tricky spot, that they might go and rule in a situation where they might suspend him. That's why I think Chapman feels confident in saying he would appeal it.
Major League Baseball is taking its time on the Jose Reyes situation, on the Chapman situation. I think there's one other one as well that's pending. When will we find out if there are suspensions and how long they'll be?
Michael, I reached out to some MLB contacts today to try and get that answer myself, and obviously I haven't heard back from anybody yet. That doesn't mean that they're dodging me. It just means I haven't heard back yet. But I would think that for the rights of everybody involved, that this is something you want to get settled before the season begins. I mean, how much investigating do you need to do in these matters? Chapman did say he spoke to MLB investigators. He has not spoken to Rob Manfred, but he did speak to investigators. I think it behooves all of the parties involved. I mean, if you're the Rockies and Jose Reyes is going to get suspended X games, you'd like to know it. If you're the Yankees and Chapman is going to get X games, you'd like to know it. I think it's only fair to the teams to let them know what's going on. And if Manfred believes that he has enough information to suspend these players, I think it's something that it's only fair that you do before the season starts.
Now, I'm not even, and we're talking with the Yes Network's Jack Curry. I'm not even sure if you can answer this, Jack, but it's something that has made me wonder since the Yankees acquired Chapman. So there are no charges pressed, and I'm sure the Yankees did their due diligence before they made the trade. The Dodgers have the highest payroll in baseball, and they really do have to improve their bullpen. They have a closer, but getting Chapman would have been a big deal as well. Why, when these charges were all of a sudden made public, did they back away? And the Yankees didn't. How could they not have known the same thing as the Yankees?
Well, I think what happened, Michael, is it first came out, and Yahoo was the outlet that broke the story, and I think it hits you like a right cross across the face, and you say, whoa, wait a second. You read that police report, and you say, man, this is a problem. But remember, the police report occurred, but what happens later? No charges are brought. The price tag for Chapman goes down. I mean, Brian Cashman was very honest in this whole matter in this whole situation. When he held a conference call after the trade, he said the price point on the player changed. I mean, the Yankees gave up 4 minor leaguers for Chapman, none of whom were going to have an impact this year and or may not have an impact at the major league level. Chigilo might. I think Eric Chigilo is going to have a major league career. Caleb Coffin is kind of a back end of the bullpen type guy. But they got him for a very, very nice price, and I think the Dodgers were spooked by the whole thing, and I think the Yankees swooped in and took advantage of the lower price.
Now, to get to the actual baseball of this season, Jack, and we had this discussion yesterday, I look at the Yankees as having some offensive problems. But, like Michael's argument is, they were second in runs scored, they were second in RBIs, but they just seem like they compiled to me, and that there was an offensive problem. They also dropped to 17th in the month of September. So how did you view their offense last year? As a problem? As something that needed to improve? Or do you think they're okay offensively?
No, I'm kind of probably going to be in the middle of you guys. I would say the same thing as Michael when you talk about the amount of runs scored. But then I look for consistency, and I look at Ellsbury and Gardner, and the two guys who need to be your catalysts. It's shocking that they had the offensive output that they did as a team with what they got from Ellsbury and Gardner, which in the second half was almost nothing. And one thing I think, one theme that you've heard Girardi talk about and you've heard Cashman talk about, be prepared to see a lot of Aaron Hicks this year. Gardner and Ellsbury, whether they like it or not, are going to get their days off. I think the Yankees are trying to figure out why did those guys both trail off as much as they did in the second half. Well, they're going to try and combat that problem themselves by resting those guys. Those guys are not playing 150 games. I guarantee you that right now. I'd say that you'll see Gardner and Ellsbury, well, they'll play. They won't start 150 games. Gardner might come in and be a defensive replacement, same for Ellsbury, but I think those two guys are as key to anybody in that lineup. Now, you can throw A-Rod and Teixeira in there. Of course, they're both a year older, and they need to produce too. But I do think that their offense, you look at it, and when you're relying on some older players and some players who've had injuries, you always have questions.
What else today? I mean, did he talk about the starting rotation? Because there seems to be 6 for 5. So what exactly is he thinking?
He did, Michael, and what was interesting is I do think that at points in 2016, they're going to use a 6th starter. He liked the idea of giving guys extra rest. We know Tanaka benefits from having extra rest. You look at a guy like CeCe as he's getting older. We've seen him pitch better on extra rest. Tanaka talked about his injury, and what was interesting is he had bone spurs removed, but he said he never felt any symptoms, that he never thought that he had a problem with those spurs, and that he doesn't think it impacted his pitching. One thing that I found interesting, too, from Girardi, is he referred to Luis Severino, who's only 22. He referred to him as a 200-inning type guy. So the Yankees are really looking for big things out of Severino this year. Between AAA and the majors last year, well, and AA, he pitched about 160 innings. So he could make the leap to 200. And I think when you're looking for length and durability out of this rotation, I think the two guys you look to are Tanaka and Severino. I don't think CeCe is that pitcher anymore. Evaldi throws too many pitches to be a guy you can rely on for 7 innings or so. And Pineda always seems to have some kind of nagging injury that's going to cost him a few weeks. So I think Tanaka and Severino are your innings eaters.